Thank you so much for making the time. So, welcome to our Policy Roundtable on bridging skilling and education to employment. My name is Nimi Shailon, and I am so honored to be here with you today as your moderator for this important conversation. So, before we get started and welcome different stakeholders to share with us a little bit more information and insights on this amazing discussion, I would like us to just be reminded of the African Union's 2024 theme on educate and skill an African fit for 21st century. This theme is a powerful call to action, reflecting a shared vision for a continent that prepares its youth to thrive in an era that is defined by rapid technology change, globalization, and unique climate changes as well. So today, and it's also been 2 days while we were here during the summit of YouthConnekt. And literally since day one, we have been emphasizing on jobs for youth through innovative skilling. And it has reminded us of the urgency of this mission. With the Africa's youth growing at an immense rate and also averaging 20% of youth employment, we must prioritize a clear, actionable strategy to skill and reskill. This is a very important thing that we should all be worried and also thinking about on a day-to-day basis, because actually the African continent depends on us, its youth, and the next generation as well. So, but again, even though the youth is growing at an immense rate, with the youth employment, we also cannot forget that there is a huge gap with accessing skilling as well as tertiary education. We have around 9% of African youth only accessing tertiary education. That is a very huge gap and challenge that we cannot overlook. So today, we are joined by leaders, policymakers, and innovators committed to reshaping the future of education and skilling pathways across Africa. So we are going to explore different scalable skills, adapt education systems to meet industry demands, and leveraging digital initiatives that are opening new employment opportunities for youth. Before we proceed into the roundtable discussion, I think I would like to invite Shadia to share with us a little bit more about how the 2 days have been, and also a summary of how the pathways went, and then we can then deep dive into our roundtable discussion. Everyone give a round of applause.
Thank you, Nimi. Good morning, everyone. As Nimi said, my names are Shadia Nwari Shenaz, and I am from the UNICEF Rwanda delegation participating in this summit. So I'd like to share with you a few reflections from a session we had on Friday afternoon after the opening ceremony. This was a career pathways lab, which focused on convening academia, private sector, policymakers and industry players, as well as young people from across the continent, to explore the different employment avenues, career pathways, and occupational profiles that young people can tap into as they strive to transition from school to work and to access decent jobs and entrepreneurial opportunities. So this session was designed to really bring together all these players who have a very crucial part in defining what the future of work looks like. The session rationale is very simple. I'm sure as we are all from different parts of Africa, the challenges that young people face in Rwanda are really cross-cutting across the continent. These are the same challenges where they're coming out of their university and secondary education with ambition, with drive, with creativity, and a lot of aspirations that are being met by a very unfortunate reality on the ground. They're graduating with competencies, with a lot of aspirations, but when they apply for jobs, they're being told you do not meet the skill set that is required for this role. They're learning perfectly passing with flying colors in school, and when they come to the job market, they're being told there's a set of soft skills or hard skills that you do not have, which are required for you to be able to tap into these opportunities. For those who are interested in venturing into business, they're also unable to tap into these opportunities because investors do not trust them enough to give them access to finance, to give them access to the different programs which could help them start up their businesses. So the session had one simple objective, starting with 6 priority sectors, which are agriculture, IT, health, finance, creative arts, as well as hospitality and tourism. What are the different avenues under this sector, in these sectors? What are the different pathways young people could follow? What are the different skill set required for the different jobs which they can tap into under these sectors? This was a really productive session, and we were able to come up with approximately 100 occupational profiles, which will be disseminated through the Ingazi portal after the summit. For those who have access to internet, please feel free to look up www.ingazi.rwanda. This platform is going to be able to help young people get AI-powered access to this career guidance information, which we have embarked on this really long journey to map out occupational profiles for all sectors. The vision is simple. Give young people access to the information they need to make informed career decisions from the onset. Career guidance is more of a privilege for most young Africans, unfortunately. This is something that they need access to, not they could have, but they need access to. They need to understand what is the skill set required for this job, an overview or a description of that role. What are the growth avenues? What are the different opportunities I could tap into at the different stages of my career? We have young people sleeping on so much potential, not knowing that being able to communicate, being able to draw, being able to really make that sell, being able to pitch a good idea. So all of these are skills that can help them access, whether it's short-term occupations, whether it's long-term occupations, or even prepare them for a really longer journey in their careers. So teaching them what are the different soft skills that you need. Do you need to only know how to code to be a programmer? Do you also need to know how to present your ideas? Do you need to only learn ancient marketing strategies, or do you also need to understand emerging digital tools for you to be an effective marketeer? So we came together to really break down with perspectives from young people, from the industry players, from the policymakers, to unpack what are the different avenues under these sectors. This is a very long journey that we have just embarked on that will continue as we map out profiles for the different sectors that are emerging and that are sustainable, which we want young people to venture into. I'd like to invite my colleague Mike to just quickly take us through one of the sectors that we focused on, and I'll wrap up in the end.
Hello, yes, so I'll just take up the story from there. I joined one of the groups, which was the creative industries. And they were quite interesting because we had a group of people who were almost entirely students. In fact, I think they were all students. So they weren't able to answer the technical question we ask about pathways from knowledge of how the industry works. But if there are any educationalists in the room, you'll be very encouraged that what they did do is they completely repurposed the session for their own use, which was to start to explore how they might make their way into being. And almost everybody wanted to do one thing, which was to be a freelance fashion designer. So we had a common understanding about what people wanted to do. Now the conversation started at the place that they had been taught. So they started in, well, what have we been taught to do? And they started with the idea they had the technical skills to go from a drawing of a piece of clothing to a finished article. And then the real conversation started. Somebody started asking questions about, well, is that actually going to help us be a freelance fashion designer? And then the conversation ranged over things they thought might be very important. And they started talking about marketing, understanding your market. They started talking about running a small business, so what it means to control the finances. And then they also started talking about a group of things which the OECD would probably call problem solving in a digital environment. How do we make sure that we are in contact with people using digital tools, but also how do we understand our market and our world using information which might be available to us. So the lovely thing about this session to bring out from it was that this is a group of students who just, when asked the question, what would it take for you to be skilled or successful as a fashion designer, pretty much came up with everything that academics say you need just by imagining what they might need to engage with the market. So we definitely ended the session with that group of people with a much greater understanding about what the pathway to their job might be. And then, of course, we were unable to go into how you might acquire those skills. But again, as an educationalist, you will notice that within the group, they displayed many of the team working skills, which can only be developed within a team. And so I think gave a beautiful demonstration of how these skills are developed as well. And of course, the session was opened by, or with a presentation from Nimi, who went through some of these transferable skills. So maybe it was in their mind. But yes, a very strong session as a part of the overall Pathways team.
Thank you, Mike. So just in summary, we had the 5 other groups having similar discussions where we were able to map out what different occupations young people could take on under agriculture, IT, health, finance, and hospitality and tourism. During this session, we had the Minister of Youth and Sports from Cabo Verde speaking to us about challenges in his country where young people, again, are unable to access the very many opportunities that stakeholders are rolling out from development partners, NGOs, government entities, private sector. We have internships in abundance. We have programs supporting young people to start businesses and run them successfully. We have companies offering jobs. We have volunteering programs, for example, the UN Volunteers Program, which takes in volunteers coming up to thousands per year. And all of these initiatives, young people are still unable to access and tap into them. This is because they're being told they do not have the skill set which is required for these opportunities. So through this initiative that we have embarked on together with the Ministry of Youth and Arts in Rwanda, as well as the Ministry of Public Service and Labor, we aim to map out occupational profiles for all sectors that young people are able to access. We aim to have, through the Ingazi platform, information that tells young people where do you start if you want to venture into agriculture, painting out an overview of what that sector entails, what are the different clusters or pathways under the sector, what are the different occupations you could take if you're into business, what are the different steps you need to take. Running a business, as Mike mentioned, spans beyond just having the idea or the ambition. You need to have marketing skills, you need to have financial skills to know how to run that business. You need to have people management skills because you are managing a team at the end of the day. And the same applies for being in employment. It's not necessarily the technical skills that make young people unattractive to employers. It's that fear that this young person might not be able to deal with the pressure in such a setting. They might not know how to escalate conflict. They might not know how to coexist with employers. And all these are skills that are they're able to access through the Ingazi platform as well. We're working with the industry players, private sector, policymakers to come up with content which really covers specifically what young people need to know as they're transitioning from school to work. So beyond what you've learned in school, how do you apply that knowledge in the workplace? When you need to come up with a project concept note, do you need to detail everything you learned in school, or what are the key things you need to be looking at, and giving them a platform to practice and really fine-tune these skills, and also offering the skills on one platform. What we're doing is bringing together all partners' initiatives. So what DPs are doing, what the NGOs are doing, what the CSOs are doing, having a hub that convenes all of these solutions in one place. So young people are able to come to the platform, access free skilling, and get certification at the end. Using these certificates, they create a portfolio on the platform and get AI recommendations on how to further strengthen their profiles. So you need to know you want to be in marketing again. What are the skill sets that are required for this job? And remember, the pathways are being defined by the same companies that will employ these young people in the future. So mapping these things out and convening them all in one place to make it easier for young people to tap into these opportunities and supporting them throughout the journey. So are you looking for internships? You can find them on the platform. Are you looking for a job? You can find it on the platform. This serves as a multifaceted platform that serves both young people and us, who are trying to link them to these opportunities, who are working tirelessly to come up with solutions tailored to young people. This is a contextualized example of a model that we took the Global Passport to Earning platform, which you all may know of, and contextualized it for Rwanda, but really for Africa. The courses that are on the platform are universal. What a young person in Rwanda needs to know for marketing is really what they need to know in Lesotho as well. There might be some contextual differences, but overall, there's a global standard for skills and requirements for different jobs. So this is a really long journey that we have just embarked on, and we really invite every partner present here today, for those who are in the youth skilling space, what content you have, link it to the platform. Let's scale the access across the continent. We're planning trainings in person, peer-to-peer, to support these efforts, but the world is going fully digital, and we need to bring all young people on board, from the rural-based youth, those with disabilities, those without access to internet. They all need to be taken into account. So how can we customize content so that it's accessible for all of them? And how can we streamline access to opportunities so that accessing an internship or volunteering opportunity ceases to be like a privilege? Young people deserve these opportunities. They're capable and they're willing, and the best we can do now is to bring together all that we're doing, which is the only way we get to tap into all this unlocked potential that young people have. So I'd like to end here and just send a reminder that if you're interested in either collaborating on providing content, linking the opportunities that you're providing within your institutions, trainings, mentorship programs, we are able to do much more if we come together and leverage this platform than if we all work in silos. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shadia. That was very insightful and really a very great summary of what went on that day. One key takeaway that I took that he actually shared, and I find it very inspiring, is like most of young people, once you graduate, you just want to just like get there. You want to maybe become the chief of staff, or you want to become a director. And then he shared the role of saying, let's say if you want to become the HR director, you need to at least have 5 years of experience as an HR associate. And then after that, you need to have maybe taken a business administrative degree at the University of Rwanda. But before you do that, you need maybe to have studied, you need to have gone into high school and maybe have taken a program around economics, geography, or something like that. Just like giving them a pathway of what you need to do to get to your dream job. And I think it's really, really great to what Shadia just mentioned on saying there is an Ingazi platform where young people can go to, and then it's AI powered to actually give them not only career recommendations, but also the career journey recommendations on what you can take to get to your dream job. And I think this is very, very important. So today we are honored to have distinguished speakers with us on the panel that bring expertise in diverse sectors, that can share with us on what are the skills needed for young people to actually get access to the jobs that they need to get, or even the careers that they need to take, the journey that they need to take to achieve the careers of their dreams or their dream jobs. But I would like to invite everyone maybe to introduce themselves a little bit, tell us a little bit about your name and also what you do. And then after that, we can dive deep into the panel discussion of today.
All right, thank you very much. Hi, everyone. and a very good morning to all of you. My name is Tembo Charles, and I come all the way from Zambia. Greetings from the beautiful country. Please visit. And on this panel also, but then basically, I come from an organization called Peza Job Zambia. We are in Zambia and working across Africa and the entire globe, supporting programs that are facilitating job opportunities from entry-level jobs and up to executive-level jobs. We are leading a lot of young people initiatives into open door opportunities. We're ready to work together, and I'll be able to present more as I'll be doing the presentation about our work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Maybe we can pass this on to Natalie.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Natalie Munyamenda. I'm Rwandan, and I'm the CEO of Kepler. Kepler works in Rwanda, Ethiopia, and Uganda. In Rwanda, we have a university called Kepler, and I can talk about that some more. We also do support in Rwanda and in Ethiopia, we support public TVETs to adopt the models that we use because we're known as the employment university. We have high employment rates, and 94% of our students are either working, opening a business, or continuing studying within 6 months of graduating, 70% already at graduation. So we can talk about that some more after.
Good morning. My name is George Okeo. I'm an associate teaching professor at Carnegie Mellon University, Africa, also the director of academics. I'm Kenyan. I've been in Rwanda nearly 4 years now. And at CMU Africa, we train master's level students in areas of ICT. We actually have 3 programs that we run, and I'll be able to talk more about some of the things we do.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Momor Dieng, and I'm the Dean of the School of Business at the African Leadership University. I'm a mathematician, a data scientist by training, so I'm passionate about teaching statistics and using it to solve real-world problems and public policy problems. The African Leadership University is part of a broader ecosystem called the AL Group. So we have the African Leadership Academy, which you may have heard of in South Africa, the university, which was started in Mauritius and Rwanda about 10 years ago, is the next level from the high school in South Africa, from the Leadership Academy. And we are also partners in the AL Group with institutions such as ALX and Santec, who are dealing with different parts of the value chain, the pipeline that is taking young people all over the continent from their studies and then training to employment. And our mission is to equip and develop ethical entrepreneurial leaders for the transformation of the continent. And I'll tell you more about that in the discussion.
Bonjour tout le monde. Je suis Nick Mandila, directeur général du Jefa Business Center. Et nous avons mis en place également l'Académie Jefa, qui est une académie panafricaine. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes sur le Congo-Brazzaville ainsi qu'à Kinshasa, où nous formons les jeunes avec notre académie. Et nous avons mis en place également le Jefa Business Center afin de domicilier les entreprises, les startups qui sont en pleine évolution, afin de faire évoluer le business africain. Merci.
I think I gave a pretty thorough introduction of who I am and what we do at UNICEF to support young people, which is wrapped under the Ingazi platform.
Thank you very much. Can we have an extra or maybe 2 extra microphones over here? Thank you. Before we get started, I would like to invite Mr. Charles Tembo from Zambia, representing Peza, on sharing with us an overview on how you are addressing skilling and youth employability in Zambia through Peza.
Thank you very much. Basically, from Peza's point of view, I'll give an example, a practical example, where we look at a young person from Lusaka, a young person from Kigali, a young person from Lagos, or a young person from Mombasa, who's just graduated with their degree program or their certification from a college or an institution that is providing skilling. Upon their graduation, they're thinking about starting a job. And what's on their mind is processes of application and how to start searching for those jobs. The easier platform that have been created have made it easy. We've created a platform called Peza, www.peza.com, that supports links, organizations that are registered directly on our platform, and it also provides a lead way for young people to register, input in your CV, basic CV, on a click. After doing that, organizations are able, who are part of our partnerships, who are major organizations across the globe, they're looking for young people who are graduates across in all different working fields. As we do that, we realize that in addressing the issue of unemployment and the other critical component, which is underemployment, which is causing a lot of mental health issues, young people are frustrated. To cut it up, when we look at the generation, the 2000 generation, the Gen Zs, there's a high issue of them dropping out of the workspace early. Not them maintaining their jobs, but we look at the three components. How do you get the job? What are the processes? How do you stay in the job? And what is the critical work culture? That is about Peza Job Zambia. And on top of that, we look at our comprehensive platform, a one-stop platform offering job listings, career resources, and training opportunities. Secondly, we look at skills development as a key component that supports young people, providing targeted training programs to address the skills gap and enhance employability. And then thirdly, career coaching, basically diving deep into most of these programs that are relevant to our key potential areas. And then also supporting a lot of programs across. When you look at our, basically I've explained on the challenges, and especially where our youth is concerned, we're looking at youth employment challenges in Africa, addressing unemployment and unemployment. Secondly, looking at lack of career guidance in most of these. But when you have that young person, wherever they are across Africa, and they tap into our hub, our center, our online platform, it gives them that opportunity to click in, input their CV, add what do they do to know clearly what they are available for, what skills do they have, are they available to work, and what can they offer in the job market. And then thirdly, looking at career coaching. But then also, I'll come to, when you look at our comprehensive work, and then also build up, basically in conclusion, I'll come to our potential for scaling up and then also building up. We're ready to collaborate and engage with all different stakeholders. We already reached a milestone. On a monthly level, we interact to and support over 7,000 people on a monthly basis. And then on an annual basis, we reach out to about 2,000 job opportunities across the board. And on top of that, we at least support 200 direct job placements, either internship opportunities or apprenticeship opportunities. And for us, it's about impact. And that is Peza Job Zambia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What happened to us giving a round of applause? I know it's Sunday, it's early in the morning, maybe we've not had our coffee, but come on, if you hear something nice, you can snap, you can clap your hands, right? So that is happening in Zambia. And sometimes we think about skilling and we are only thinking about Anglophone countries. But I think it's really great to also hear from Nick on the Francophone side of the region. Nick, pouvez-vous nous dire comment vous abordez l'employabilité et le développement des compétences au Congo-Brazzaville?
Alors, depuis 2022, nous avons mis en place le Jefa Business Center qui accompagne les jeunes sur tout ce qui est formation avec l'Académie Jefa. Voilà, tout ce qui accompagne les jeunes avec l'Académie des Jefa sur le point de la formation, sur le point du rehaussement du potentiel des jeunes et sur le point de l'employabilité également. En Afrique, les jeunes font face à un défi important sur leur parcours professionnel, notamment sur le manque de formation adaptée et l'accès limité aux conseils de carrière. Notamment dans mon pays, il n'y a pas de conseil en orientation. Aujourd'hui, il y a des jeunes qui font face à ce problème-là et qui font des formations qui ne sont pas adaptées au marché local, adaptées au marché de l'emploi actuellement. Et c'est un problème en ce moment dans mon pays. Pourquoi? Parce que cela crée également du chômage parce que plusieurs personnes font des options de masse et ne se concentrent pas sur les formations qui sont adaptées, qui sont orientées emploi. Et aujourd'hui, il y a plusieurs insuffisantes d'opportunités d'emploi. Et selon l'Organisation internationale du travail, OIT, le taux de chômage des jeunes en Afrique subsaharienne était de 13% depuis 2023, bien au-dessus de la moyenne mondiale. Et plus de 60% des jeunes diplômés sont confrontés à des difficultés pour trouver de l'emploi correspondant à leur niveau professionnel. Pourquoi? Parce que les formations ne sont pas adaptées à la compétence des jeunes. La solution que nous apportons avec le Jefa Academy, c'est d'apporter aux jeunes des formations professionnelles, un programme de formation technique, de développement de compétences adaptées aux besoins de marché local ainsi qu'international. L'orientation de carrière, parce qu'on a un problème sur l'orientation de notre pays, il n'y a pas de conseiller d'orientation. Nous apportons cette solution-là avec des services de mentorat, des conseils personnalisés, l'évaluation des compétences pour aider les jeunes à définir leurs objectifs professionnels. Et nous lions également de partenariat avec les entreprises. Nous collaborons avec des entreprises locales et internationales pour offrir des stages, parce qu'aujourd'hui, pour avoir des opportunités de stage, surtout dans mon pays, c'est compliqué. Et nous aidons ces jeunes-là en se liant en partenariat avec les entreprises afin de les offrir des opportunités de stage, d'apprentissage, ainsi que des opportunités d'emploi. Le Jefa Academy se distingue également par son approche numérique interactive parce que nous travaillons sur une plateforme qui permettra d'avoir accès aux cours en ligne, des ateliers de formation, ainsi qu'un outil de gestion des carrières vers une application mobile. Nous avons mis en place un test d'orientation web grâce à la AI qui permet aux jeunes déjà de passer les tests d'orientation avec l'application KPH. Donc vous pouvez passer les tests d'orientation directement chez vous et on vous posera une série de questions et on vous dira selon votre potentiel quelle formation sera adaptée à votre niveau. L'application permet également l'analyse des compétences basées à la IA, comme j'ai dit tout à l'heure. Donc l'utilisation de l'intelligence artificielle pour évaluer les compétences des utilisateurs et fournir des recommandations personnalisées aux formations et aux opportunités de carrière. La plateforme permet également de mettre en place une communauté et un réseautage, la création d'un réseau virtuel pour permettre aux jeunes de se connecter avec des mentors, des experts de l'industrie et d'autres professionnels afin de pouvoir continuer également avec l'orientation continue. En résumé, le Jefa Academy, c'est plus de 2000 jeunes formés, 30 emplois créés au sein de l'équipe et 400 jeunes en formation. Et nous avons signé 10 partenariats avec les entreprises afin d'accompagner ces jeunes-là pour des opportunités de stage, des emplois et pourquoi pas également travailler avec ces entreprises. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Nick. Just for the folks that don't understand French, I think maybe I can give you a little bit of a summary. Jefa is also a training platform or program that is actually addressing jobs gaps on the continent, with 20% of youth employment on the continent, and also addressing skilling opportunity gaps. So Jefa is actually providing tech programming opportunities to young people in Congo-Brazzaville, mentorship, as well as partnering with local and international organizations for job placements. So how they learn, the learning is online. Another opportunity that they provide to young people is actually AI-powered platform that recommends young people the skills that they need for job placements and also recommending them to job opportunities that they have. Another opportunity that they provide is fellowship community, just creating a community of people that are on that platform so that they can also share opportunities around. They have 2,000 young people trained, 30 jobs placement, and 400 that are currently enrolled. Let's give them another round of applause. Thank you so much, Nick. So as we are progressing, we've heard from Peza on an amazing job that they're doing in Zambia. We just heard from Nick on a great job that they're doing in Congo-Brazzaville. But we have amazing stakeholders, I must say, that are also addressing skilling and also really the future of education at a higher scale. We are very much honored to have Nathalie Munyamhenda, who leads Kepler in Rwanda. And I would like her to tell us on what key skills do you think young people need to succeed in different careers? What partnerships are helping connecting education with industries to ensure students learn relevant skills? And how is Kepler supporting these efforts, knowing that Kepler is actually a key role player when it comes to providing skills, but also graduating some of the most needed graduates on the market, either locally or even on an international scale?
Thank you. All right, so I think a couple of things before I talk about the skills. I think a lot of players in many different countries are trying to address this issue of skilling and unemployment in Africa, which is really the main issue that is faced by young people and our economies. I think the challenge is scale, obviously, and I always challenge my own team that if we can do something with 1,000 students, can we replicate that for 100,000 students? And I want to talk about basically our mission started because we were interested in the poorest students and those with refugee status, because we wanted to prove that if you can take somebody who has never touched a computer, because most of our students come from rural public high schools and they have seen a computer but in general have never interacted with the computer, and students with refugee status here in Rwanda and in Ethiopia and other places we operate, we wanted to basically show that with a certain type of model, you could get them from there to a place that they can do any job in any industry. And so if you're able to prove then that first point, how do you then do that at scale, which is the other harder point? So Kepler, we have been operating for 20 years, but specifically in the higher education space, we've been working for 10 years. And our students come in, as I said, have never worked on a computer, and they're going to be doing a degree that's fully online. And so that's a huge challenge. Number one, there is the issue of the digital skills, but there's also a language issue. So they are going to be doing a US degree completely in English when their English levels are low. And they're going to be asked to do a project-based degree. Viven's here, who's at the end, he's one of our alumni, one of our first alumni. He's a big guy now, but back in the day, he can tell you how he started. So the challenge is, there are multiple levels. And actually, I have come to the conclusion, and I'll do a PhD on this so that maybe it'll have some stronger research on this. But we have to be quite careful with just saying online is the solution. Because we noticed that in the pandemic, our outcomes were quite low. We were challenged because students were not connecting with one another. They were not collaborating in person. They were suffering from confidence issues, mental health issues. So the question is, how do you leverage online without losing the human touch that makes the learning experience work? That's another challenge that we are currently trying to figure out. So we are most likely, the solution after COVID was like, we're going to just do everything online. We're going to recruit online. We're going to go. And now we've just kind of moved away from that theory. And we are trying to figure out at what points do you blend human touch so that students, because humans learn by interacting. So I've completely gone off track. But the point is, at Kepler, we are interested in figuring out how do you do learning and skilling for the most vulnerable students. Because if you figure it out for the most vulnerable students, then everybody else, it'll be fine. And what we have learned is that the transferable skills of, digital skills are transferable skills. Communication, problem solving, collaboration for purpose, so collaborating with a purpose, adaptability and creativity. When we survey employers every year, so we have become quite lucky, because now we don't chase employers, they chase us for our graduates, right? Because they've come to understand that every year when we survey them, we want to understand how are our graduates doing? How are our internships going? We visit them when they're doing internships, and we also have a manual for employers to say, hey, we're not giving you graduates to go make tea. Like, this is not what we're doing. And so we follow up very carefully, but it's 1,000 students. I want to remind you that there's no miracle cure for 100,000 students here. We speak to them and they tell us, for example, I'll give you one thing that has come up in the last few years, has been, your students are they're overconfident. So they speak really well, they have amazing digital skills, they learn very quickly, but they talk too much. They get there and they want to see the CEO. So we ended up creating a very, I would say, a labor of love, a life skills program to talk about how do you build humility? How do you solve problems? How do you speak last, So in other words, because employers know that we've invested in making sure that when our students graduate, we've picked up all of the feedback that they've given us, they are willing to do the rest once we get them to the finish line, right? And as I said, we encourage our students to be working in their last year. And because we understand, remember I said our students are vulnerable. They do not have a fallback plan once they graduate. There's no one paying the bills. There is no, and actually that's one of the reasons why, I do not believe, let me be very careful here. I do not believe people should be entrepreneurs right away, because I feel like the students that we are dealing with do not have a fallback plan. So they need to be working, they need to be making some sort of income, and then they can think about doing something for themselves. So that is my, right now at Kepler, our entrepreneurship center does not take on new entrepreneurs. We scale existing entrepreneurs because we just don't believe that everybody should be an entrepreneur. I actually think very few people should be entrepreneurs. But those are my side-by theories. So transferable skills that will continue to be relevant in the 21st century are digital skills, communication, problem solving, collaboration for purpose, adaptability and creativity. We do not believe, so actually our students, in general, employers can't even tell you what they graduated in, right? So we graduate management students who focus on logistics, we graduate communication majors, and very soon project management and business analytics graduates. But they can't tell you, this guy finished in what? Really what they're trying to get is, can this person learn on the job and do exactly what I need them to do? And that's what we've been able to work on. In more vulnerable settings, like refugee settings, you really have to go further back to build confidence to first apply. So students with refugee status or who are displaced don't believe that this is real or that they can apply or that when they apply, they get in. So you have to give them English and digital skills, not in university, but in high school, because then they will actually not apply for that scholarship that they need to do. So we also have a program that goes further back in high school. And just lastly, before I finish, we've actually been more interested now. Around where we work in Kigali, we have a couple of high schools that are close by, and we've kind of adopted them because what we were noticing is, we want the students in those high schools to want to come to Kepler, and many of them cannot because they're struggling with the same issues that we have. So we started a foundation program. I just forgot to mention, Kepler students do a foundation year before they get to the degree content. And in that foundation year, we do digital skills, English, soft skills, we do life skills, we do all these things. And then, when we survey employers, the only things that they mention are those things that they learn in the foundation year. So that foundation year remains the most important part of our program, actually, not the degree programming, but don't tell the accreditor. It's very important. All the degree programming is very important. So in the programs that we do with refugee students, we go back into high school. They do it in the year they're about to graduate or just after they graduate, and we help them also apply for scholarships. There are many opportunities, actually, we're noticing both for jobs and skilling. People don't know about it, or we do a logic exam when they're about to enter Kepler. And I am always surprised at how complex and complicated the answers are for simple questions. Which means that in high school, they're absorbing a high level of complexity where they should be simplifying. And I'll leave you that thought.
Oh my God, this is great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Natalie. What I like about Kepler is how you're promoting inclusivity. A lot of time when we think about youth skilling, we are thinking about people in the cities, literally not including refugees. And we have a lot of refugees on the continent. So as we're thinking about youth skilling, let's make sure that no one is left behind as well. And I would like maybe to come back on the entrepreneurship. But as speaking of entrepreneurship, Dr. Momar, can you tell us a little bit about how does ALU integrate entrepreneurship and leadership as a core components of the degree programs? And what are your learnings from your approaches that can enrich the outcomes of skilling and education across the continent? And I would also like to hear about how you're developing entrepreneurs at ALU. And what do you think about Natalie's take on that everyone should not be an entrepreneur at an early age? I'm just some people. So maybe tell us a little bit about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. ALU was founded on the premise that one of the things that is most needed on this continent is leadership. Leadership together with entrepreneurship, but leadership as a foundational concept, as a building block on everything. You can have all the skills you want, all the technicity you want. If you don't have certain foundational core values and concepts that guide you in your development as a human being, as a person, then it will be a less fruitful and probably a less impactful life to be lived. So we have a lot of challenges on this continent, and talent and skill, I think, is probably not what we lack most on the continent. I would argue that leadership, whether it's at the political level, whether it's even at the social level, when you think about, how our societies are organized and how we deal with inclusivity, how we deal with civil rights and civil participation, leadership tends to be what is lacking: a sense of agency, a sense of control over your environment, and a belief that you can change things, that we have the power to change our lives, we have control of our futures, and all of those things are rooted in leadership. And so that's the premise on which ALU was built. That's why it was called the African Leadership University. Our founder, Fred Swanneker, was very intentional on in terms of making that a cornerstone. And so in everything that we do, whether it's at the business school, in our engineering program, you'll find that the particularity of training at ALU is to put leadership at the center of everything. So we do that in lots of different ways. For instance, in our undergraduate program, we have a set of modules that we call the Leadership Core, right? I know some of the ALU students are in the room also. We are nicely represented by people who have had tremendous careers here in Rwanda and elsewhere. So they will not let me lie. And usually when we ask our students what was the most memorable, impactful part of your training at ALU, they will tell you it's the leadership core. It's that part of the training which is parallel to everything else that they may have learned in economics, in entrepreneurship, in everything else. So what is leadership core? It's basically a summary of many of the things that Sharia, that Natalie have talked about. It's about leading self, understanding yourself as a person, as a human being, what is your impact, being able to master the 5 C's of critical thinking, communication, collaboration, computational thinking, and all of those things that we all agree are what makes you really successful in the real world, in the professional world, right? It's also team leadership. Team dynamics. How do you actually work with others? How do you work under pressures? How do you manage up, manage laterally, manage down? How do you add value to a team, right? You have to be able to do that in any field. And I would argue that, you can be as good as you want. Technically, if you don't have that, you're probably going to have trouble in your career. And conversely, if you start with that, then chances are the technicity, you can acquire it and learn it on the job. But those are some of the things that employers also, similar to what Natalie was saying, the employers constantly tell us that they need from graduates, people who are self-starters, who can, from day one, hit the ground running and not ask too many questions, but also know when to ask questions and when to ask for help, when to escalate and things like that, right? So that's what they do. And we of course go through the theory of all of that, but we make it very experiential. I think that's one of the things that ALU is known for, the fact that our learning is very experiential. We don't have professors, we have people who facilitate. We really let our students thrive and develop as leaders in an environment where they feel safe. They don't feel talked down to. It's not a top-down approach, a classical academic approach. We really allow them a lot of freedom, and in fact, maybe sometimes too much freedom. And one of the things that also ALU is known for is this freedom in charting your academic career. So what we do at the beginning is we ask them to define a mission. And a mission is just basically a problem that they want to solve, because we want them to be leaders who are entrepreneurial and socially conscious and are able to think about their world as I said, as an agent of change, someone who's actually going to do something about things, right? Not just complain about them, not just theorize about them. So that mission is a problem that they need to solve, and they choose it very early on in their career, and then everything else is arranged, the whole academic program is arranged around that mission. This is what you want to do, this is what you want to solve, this is what you want to impact. What tools do you need now to be able to do that? And when I think about my life, right, going through graduate school, it's only when I got to ALU that I realized that that's what actually I was doing in graduate school. When you do a PhD, you start with a problem, and then you take courses that allow you to solve that problem, right? And as you go, you refine the question and you make it more and more precise, and then eventually you assemble all the tools to solve that problem. That's what we do in graduate school at the very end of our training, when you're about to become a PhD, right? That's how it should have been from the beginning. And that's what we try to do at ALU. We give our undergraduates the ability to really think about their learning and take control of it the same way a PhD student would, by thinking from the end, right? What is the end state? What is the end result that I want? What is the mission that I want? How do I want to be remembered in the world? We have all these leadership exercises that I'm sure many of you know, writing your epitaph, right? The last words that people would say about you. So it's at all levels, and it includes the academic part of their training. So the way we also make this concrete is to allow them, I was talking about the freedom, we allow them to sort of roam around, and I use that in a playful way. So ALU has hubs through our partnership with other members of the ALG group, as I said, ALX and other parts of the group. We are fortunate that we have 2 physical campuses here in Rwanda and in Mauritius, but we also have hubs across the continent and across the world, in fact. So we allow our students to go and test these theories and these learnings that they are acquiring throughout their career in various very concrete environments. So for instance, if they're interested in conservation, we allow them to go in some of our marine hubs in Kenya or in Mauritius to actually work on concrete problems with people who are in the field dealing with those conservation issues, and similarly for other aspects. So we are lucky to be able to have, for instance, a hub in Silicon Valley, and we send students there every year to talk to global industry leaders and people who work at companies like Tesla and others. And that allows them to really have a very global and a view of leadership and entrepreneurship that is really crouched in reality, and not to have any complexes about the world, and to really feel empowered as young Africans to understand that if they work hard, they are as talented and are able to achieve the same things that all of these young men and women around the world are able to do. So this is, in a summary, how we deal with entrepreneurship and leadership and what we try to instill.
Thank you so much, Dr. Momar. Those are some great insights. Natalie has a hard stop in the next 5 minutes, but before maybe she exits, I would like to ask you, most of the time when we think about, I think I touched on that, when we think about skilling, we think about people who have access to this information. We're thinking about youth in cities, or people who actually have access to the internet, or even electricity. Can you share with us on how can we be more inclusive to actually reach out to these young people in refugee camps, or who are not fortunate as many young people on the continent, so that they can also have access to this information that we have, or even these platforms that are out there, and then they can be able to shape their future?
I mean, that's a hard question. If we had solved it, we would have already solved it. But I would say we have to look at the design of our programming. So oftentimes, you know, as higher education leaders, whenever we meet in closed doors, I'm always asking them, like, you know, how much does it cost to run your program per student? And this is a question I've been working on for a couple of years with my team, because quality costs, and it costs because you're getting amazing facilitators. Our course we call our facilitators as well. You are having to deal with accreditation requirements. You are having to set up physical infrastructure. So there are things you can't skip, and all those things cost money. So the question is, how do you reduce the costs enough that you can take it to every corner of the country that you're operating in? And it's a tough question. Number one, I think, you know, you have to have a good government that's interested in solving access issues. Like in Rwanda, for example, we are quite lucky that there's broadband everywhere. They're trying to bring laptops in schools, and, you know, content that can be accessed offline. Those are the basic last mile issues that we have to solve, upon which the rest of us can build. Like, if those things are missing, really what you can do is what we do, which is you go into one camp and you operate for a few years and you touch those people. There's just a limited amount of work that you can do. But from that perspective, if some of the issues at a basic level are fixed, the last mile issues, it really becomes about, you have to think about those people. Like, I think that if you can't solve a quality issue, the content being offline, great teachers, because I think that somehow the idea of working without great teachers has been lost, which is completely false. We will never take away the experience of young children and young people interacting with great teachers, call them facilitators if you want, but that interaction is key to learning. And so I think that we have to design programming that allows us to get the best young people in schools, teaching. That's like my bottom line. You know, this Teach for America program or Teach for All program, I used to always say, if we could absorb that and repackage that in all our countries, we would have solved the major 50% of our issues, because that's where the key issue is. Therefore, all the young people we're producing must have transferable skills. Even if you're a physicist or a mathematician like Momar, especially if you're a mathematician like Momar, you need transferable skills. But we have to make sure everyone who's leaving our doors has transferable skills, has leadership skills, has a mission. Because if we're lucky, you know, we should send them first in the first 2-3 years of their life to go and teach as well in rural areas. But we have to be really, I would say, deliberate about it. The other thing is, I think that people who come from vulnerable settings must be taught by people who have gone through those experiences. One of the reasons we do really well in our refugee programming is because it's run by refugees. I myself was a refugee. And so there are just things that you understand inherently because you've had that experience, right? You understand, for example, our programming with refugees in high schools, the young girls go 80, it's a 16-week program, 8 weeks for boys, 16 weeks for girls. Why do we make it double? Because we're addressing confidence, we're addressing sexual reproductive health, we're addressing all these other things, and it's just the way it is. And we don't explain ourselves. You know, luckily we are not a public institution, so we don't have to. But we have, based on our experience and the lived experience of the people who run this program, we know that this is correct. Another thing I'll tell you, for example, in the camp, when we bring students into our degree programming, we sit down with parents and oftentimes with husbands, right? So these are women who are married, they're married young, and they're coming to study, let's say at 21, they're starting their degree program. And we have a conversation with their husband, and we say, hey, this is what the pathway looks like. This is what the time requirements. And this is what it could do for your family once you graduate. So we're not fighting some sort of battle. We're saying, hey, come and partner with us for the success of your wife, and this is the outcome that could happen. And that's why it works. So we've become quite creative in how we address some of the challenges that are living challenges that people face. So we don't want to operate here in some theories. We want to look at what is happening on the ground. But for scale, I think we have to take all these amazing young people that are coming out of our doors and send them back to teach, because that will solve a lot of our problems. If we are able to fix the ECD, the early childhood development challenges that we face, we will set ourselves up for success. Because, we are doing at our foundation program, we are doing things that should have been done, and I'm not even kidding, in early primary. And so you are really, in 7 months, you're putting a young person through, we call it baptism by fire. That first 7 months at Kepler is hell, because they're unpacking everything that they've learned. And we're saying you have to learn these set of skills that would allow you, and the future might look different. So the content is really important of what you're studying, of management, of business analytics, but you might have a different world by the time you graduate. And so that's what we're trying to teach them. But for inclusivity, it has to be on purpose. There's nothing that's going to happen to us, especially on the continent, when we have dealt with being undermined politically, being destroyed economically. We really have to be deliberate in how we build our inclusive societies. And I apologize that I have to leave, but you can write to me at natalie@kepler.org. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natalie. That was very insightful, and thank you for sharing your experience. Everyone that is here, we cannot solve for youth skilling if we are not also solving for vulnerable youth on the continent. So as we're thinking about youth skilling, let's also think about the ones that don't have access to internet, electricity, or in vulnerable communities. Thank you so much. As I'm about to wrap up on the panel discussion questions, I would like to invite people in the audience, if you have a question after Professor George is done sharing his insight, please raise your hand and someone is going to hand over a mic and then you can ask a question. Professor George, from Carnegie Mellon University, from your experience providing advanced tech training, how is the demand for skills changing for technical engineers? And can you also tell us about the new abilities or new skills that are becoming important to meet the industry needs?
Thank you, Mimi. So at CMU Africa, we train generally on ICT. We have 3 programs that we offer on ICT. But I think it is the experience that our students have when they're both students, when they come in, and even during the breaks when they're doing internships, that is important. And also the additional support services that we provide to the students. So one of the things that we try to achieve at CMU Africa is to encourage our students into thinking of entrepreneurship, thinking of going into startups, among other things. So because of that, we then expose them to training on entrepreneurship. As an example, the reason why we do that is we realize that the deep technical skills that they may have may probably lead them to some jobs, some employment. But what if they could utilize the deep technical skills that they have together with the entrepreneurship training that they have been exposed to, so that they can actually do their own startups? They could also work in startups, because in some cases you do not have to start a company, but you could use your entrepreneurial mindset within a startup company and help them in scaling. So that is one of the things that we try to do. And so at CMU Africa, we have what we call the Industry Innovation Lab. What the Industry Innovation Lab does is that it tries to incubate startups. But at the same time, it also encourages our students to ideate and to build their ideas into things that could ultimately turn out into viable businesses. But then one of the things that we are trying to encourage them to realize is that they need to develop their deep technology and then transform that deep technology into products that can be commercialized. So we are very intentional about that. to an extent that what we do for our professors is we encourage them as much as possible to provide mentorship support to these startups that our students or even our alumni basically are working on. Now, in terms of typical competencies that are needed, when our students go for internships, we talk with our industry partners who are hosting these students, and they give us feedback. And there's something that Natalie said, that the students who at times walk in, they look overconfident and all these kind of things. I think that is also something that we have had. And it is one of the reasons that we try also to expose our students to soft skills. And these soft skills include areas like collaboration and leadership, areas like teamwork, communication. How do you communicate effectively to the audience? One of the things that I always say is that if you're communicating something technical, ask yourself, if you had a grandparent who was not as literate as you are, would they understand what you're explaining to them? And we try to encourage our students to learn to communicate technical concepts simply, so that people actually would understand and would not interpret the things that they're actually trying to talk about. So we have a lot of programs right from when our students are coming in. During the orientation program, we expose them to skills that they need to succeed. And throughout the journey, we expose them to these skills. In some of the programs we do, we let our students get used to solving problems that are coming from industry through practicum projects and capstone projects. So typically a company would propose to us an idea, and the company and the students are responsible for defining the needs and the requirements and advising the students as they work through this. So through this, students get to learn teamwork, collaboration, they get to learn presentation and communication, and they also solve a real-world problem. To an extent that in some of the cases, we have had some of these students, as they graduate into the companies that gave these project ideas so that they could actually implement those ideas. So we focus on the key technical skills in machine learning, in artificial intelligence, in cybersecurity, and digital public infrastructure. So within the space of digital public infrastructure, we have, for instance, what we call the Upanzi Digital Public Goods Lab at CMU Africa, which also has a digital experience center. So what we do here is we are able to experiment with different types of solutions. So if a government, for instance, had some interest in implementing an idea, we have a digital experience center through which that kind of idea can be experimented, can be showcased. And some of the people working within this are people who have graduated from our programs, among others. And we are of course trying to expand this to other spaces. Now, one of the other things that we are doing through what we call the Center for Inclusive Digital Transformation of Africa is to understand the skills gaps. And once we have understood the skills gaps, to then come up with mechanisms of bridging those skills gaps. And so, obviously for us, we would have a bias towards cybersecurity, towards software development engineering, towards AI, machine learning, data science, among other areas. But like we have said, we are looking at people who can wrap their minds around this technology and innovate. People who can influence government in policy. So one of the other things we do with our programs is we have very agile curriculum that allows us to explore new concepts and come up with new courses. Courses, for instance, like in policy analysis. Why is that important? Because when governments and other organizations are coming up with policies, how do we ensure that these policies are actually implementable? These policies do not then stifle the ability to actually realize the innovations that we need, among other things. So maybe for now, that is what I will say.
Thank you so much, Professor George. Again, we have someone representing Peza from Zambia. We have Carnegie Mellon University. We have ALU, African Leadership University. We have Jefa, if I'm not mistaken. And also we have Ingazi program. So if you have any question, please mention on who you would like to address the question to so that you can be able to move forward. Before we do that, do we have any takers? Any question? Okay, 3 questions. We'll take 3 questions. But before we do that, I would like to invite Shadia maybe to share some insights. Just 1 minute, Shadia, because the time is not on our side. Thank you.
Thank you, Nimi. So this Ingazi platform, like Jefa and many others, is just one example of the platforms which are supporting the YouthConnekt Africa agenda. So I'd just like to give a very special thanks to the YouthConnekt team for really bringing all these different stakeholders to the table. When we launched the same platform in India a few years back, within less than 12 months, we had 1 million users enrolled and approximately 500,000 courses enrolled for and completed within less than 12 months. For Rwanda, within 1 year, we have approximately 4,000 people enrolled and only 1,500 courses completed. What this means is this is something that we all need to be very mindful of in designing these programs. A very common mistake is to assume that what worked for India will work for Rwanda or will work for Africa, which is not the case. For Rwanda and for many other countries in Africa, we need to take into account the different needs of young people, the levels of proficiency in digital literacy, in language, which is all very crucial in them being able to leverage a digital platform. For Rwanda, we are rolling out a peer-to-peer model where young digital ambassadors will be taking trainings within districts to make sure that we're supporting the digital component of this platform, while we equip the platform with the courses, with all the technologies that are AI-powered to make sure that we have a 360 on this one-stop shop hub. We're also supporting them on ground to make sure that they're getting the training to be able to know how to use the platform. In most cases, we're starting with as early as, what is a computer? How do you operate a computer? This is something that we can make the mistake to assume that they understand, but as Natalie mentioned, it's a very, very big mistake. We need to understand that we have to start from scratch. And all these communities, for Rwanda, we have more than 80% of youth based in rural communities with limited access to internet. And you have in most countries, again, many hubs and infrastructure put in place by different partners that are not being used. We have in each district of Rwanda a youth center equipped with computers and internet connectivity. But you find in most cases that young people, not only do they not know what these centers are for, but they don't have the skills required for them to leverage this existing infrastructure. So through the Ingazi initiative, we're bringing together all stakeholders beyond just those offering skilling opportunities and career advancement opportunities, but tapping into this existing infrastructure. At UNICEF, we leverage the existing continental partnership with Airtel Africa to zero-rate the Ingazi platform. Now, any user having an Airtel SIM card can use the platform without having to incur internet costs. We're using the youth-friendly centers established by the Ministry of Youth in all districts to train to give young people access to the platform. And we're using existing structures like the National Youth Council, the RISA Digital Ambassadors under the Ministry of ICT, and many more to take this training within communities. And that is the only way we can even hope to ever achieve scale just within Rwanda. This is an encouragement for other countries present here. For those who are able to tap into the platform, please do feel free to. And for those who are able to replicate this model where you really leverage existing solutions over coming up with siloed initiatives within institutions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shadia. We have a question over there. Let's give that young lady in green the microphone. Again, your name, the country you're representing, and your question, and who you would like the question to be addressed to.
Thank you very much. My name is Hope Ezra Mkwinda from Zambia. My question is directed to Professor. So looking at the technicalities that go into, say, for example, areas that do not have access to internet, areas where organizations or programs that everyone is doing in this room can be accessed. I want to applaud all the initiatives that you're doing. They're really great. And I do believe that many countries can benefit from that. So my question is, Professor, looking at your experience in the fields and how best these programs can be incorporated, is it a feasible idea for Africa to create a coalition where these ideas that are on the table of every one of your panelists can be actualized and then be integrated into the already existing curriculums of different countries as Africa, so that it is easier for a young person in the grassroots to be able to access and learn about these ideas even without the access to internet? Because I do not think everyone has access to internet that they can find in Ngazi online or be able to access that online platform, but they are able to they are able to benefit from these wonderful programs that are being initiated here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor, before you go with the answer, let's maybe take another person in that. Yes. Can we have okay, you can go and then let's have a gentleman for the sake of. Okay, she goes and then you go. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Zulekha Shinebo from Sudan. I have a question to this mister, but I don't remember his name. Sorry.
Which one?
The third one on this side.
Momar, Dr. Momar.
Okay, doctor.
Yes.
My question is, in what ways we can youth-led organization can help and focus in voices marginalized in youth in Africa, like rural youth, youth with disability, and youth in war like in Sudan, because we face many problems, many challenges, many difficult to continue our medical journey in education. And my friend, my sister, my brother in Sudan, I'm so sad for that, but they lost the home, they lost the schools, university. They lost everything, no internet, no world, no anyone with them. So what's the way we can help them and we connect again with the other world in your view? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Momar, did you get that? Okay, perfect. Let's have the gentleman.
Right, thank you very much. I have two questions. One is going to the academia on the panel, and then the rest of the anybody in the academia section here. Now,
before you proceed, your name, the
my
country
name
you're
is
representing.
John Baptist Okello from Uganda, from TexFAD. TexFAD is a skill training academy. Now, my question is, oftentimes when we are graduating from universities, we write projects, and then we graduate. It's one of the things that, it's marked, and then we get the grades and all of that. But oftentimes I've also realized that in those projects are potential businesses, are potential companies. In those projects are potentials of big industries, but in most cases we leave them at the university. They're in the offices. Somebody has already graduated but has left a company at the university and is going to look for a job, but there's a company left at the university. How can we bridge this? Is there any approach that the university can have? I love what Professor said about what they're already doing, trying to connect the graduates to businesses and all of that. But can the academia in the building, can we have an approach where these university projects will link these students to a potential public or private enterprise, and before we realize these projects becomes a business or they mature into a business? To be a thing, if we do that, then we will be bridging the skilling, education, and then the employment. And then my last question is to every person in the skilling space here, including me. Oftentimes also, we focus on skilling. And while we do skilling, we leave the person we have skilled or the trainees in this instance are vulnerable. Yes, they have the skills, but what next then? Can we have a manufacturing hub of the skills we are training? Giving an example of what I do, I skill youth into, let's say, hand weaving, one of the things I do, but I have a manufacturing hub that employs the youth have skill in that. Can we hold in the skilling space have something like that, such that our skilling is sustainable? Because if we only skill and after skilling somebody goes back home, then it's not sustainable. But to the academy and every other person skilling, can we have a skilling hub and a manufacturing hub to make our skilling sustainable? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we can start with Professor George and then move to Momar and then proceed with the rest of the audience. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nimi. So I'll tackle the first question, which was around access challenges. I think that's how I would summarize it. Not everyone has access to the online resources. So obviously, this means that even for us in academia, we have to use what we typically refer to as inclusive strategies. So in academia, when we use inclusive strategies in the design of our courses, it means that right from the start, we look at all the different types of people we are likely to impact and prepare for them. We don't design, as people say, for the average person, because apparently there is no average person. So because there is no average person, we have to look for that individual who probably has the biggest problem with access and make this material available to them. So normally, as a result of that, when we do maybe online material that is available, we also have mechanisms of accessing that material. Probably it could come in, someone gets to download, and they don't have to interact with it online. So that's one of the things that can actually be done for that. Now, more practically, at CMU Africa, for instance, we have this thing that we call the AfriTech Network. So the thing about the AfriTech Network is an Africa Engineering and Technology Network, is a network of universities that is expected to grow into 10 universities. There are already 8 universities in it. The way that is structured is that these universities are in different regions of the continent. So we have universities in Northern Africa, Southern Africa, Eastern Africa, West Africa as well. And so, for instance, in Southern Africa, we have WITS as one of the members of the network. The idea is that WITS becomes a node in Southern Africa through which we can actually partner with other institutions, which essentially means that even if your country or universities in your country are not part of this network, they have access to the resources that are provided through the AfriTech Network. One of the resources provided through the AfriTech Network is what we refer to as teaching and learning. And the other one is, of course, about pathways to opportunity, which is where entrepreneurship comes in, among other things. And the last one is basically knowledge creation. So if I focus only on the teaching and learning, one of the things that the members of the AfriTech Network are looking at is that ability to actually expand access. If you look at our institution, at the moment we only have about 330 students enrolled in campus. If you want to have an impact in a continent with over 1 billion people, we have to look for other ways of actually having that impact. So we are planning things like certificate programs. Now the question is, if we are to come to Zambia, for instance, to people who do not have access to these online resources that they could use, how will we still be able to facilitate those certificate programs to them? So obviously we have to look at ways of partnering with organizations locally, with institutions locally, so that we can provide support. Because like Natalie did mention, that support, that interaction is very important, in addition, of course, to access to those resources. So those are some of the things that we are doing to help with that. Now, in terms of projects that students do and gather dust in the shelves, what I would say is that for us at CMU Africa, one of the things that we are doing, and I think one of my colleagues, Stanley, is somewhere here, is our Associate Director of Entrepreneurship. One of the things we are looking at is how do we move from the research projects that we do into commercialization, both from professors and from faculty. It's not something we have done very well. We have one company that came from a research project that repurposes batteries and now is actually, I think, a commercially viable organization. I think they are probably even showcasing somewhere around here. It's called SLS Energy. So that was as a result of a student work in the lab with a professor, incubated in the Industry Innovation Lab, graduated from that lab a year or so ago, and now is out there with customers already in Rwanda and in Congo, just as an example. So that is something that we are doing, but we are still making baby steps. So I think there is room there to actually expand this. And maybe the last thing that I would talk about is, again, on the same, one of the things we are doing with our students is to give them opportunities for internships in companies. So we have what we are calling a tech skills marketplace. So what we do with the tech skills marketplace is a company comes in, typically a startup company, and says that I'm looking for a data scientist. Okay? But maybe it is very expensive to actually get this highly skilled data scientist. So what we are doing then is to support that company with covering part of the cost of this intern. And I think we have placed interns in over 30 companies in the last 2 years, which are startup companies. So what we are basically trying to do is to expose our students to that environment where they can actually take what they're learning from class, go into these organizations and implement their ideas. And if there is anything that they want to innovate within those organizations, because during that period they're with the organizations, they then get that chance to do that. So that is also something that we are trying to do, just to ensure that what we are teaching in class, what the students are doing through their research and all these other things, can actually be leveraged within organizations that need it, organizations that in some cases could not support it. So what we do is, I think we cover about 70+% of the cost of that student being in the organization where they're doing the internship.
Thank you very much. I'll try to be very brief. I think that my colleague, Professor George, has touched upon many of the points that were, the questions that were asked. I just want to make one comment on the issue of online versus offline. I fully understand the challenge and the obstacles of online versus offline, and sometimes it feels like many of the things that we talk about, that we present, are unrealistic for sort of the real world environment that many youth in Africa are living in. But I want to challenge you not to see this as a static situation. And the analogy that I want to make is, I recently was at a large US university. I will not name them, not to make publicity, but there was this computer called the Mark II, which was a computer, one of the first computer basically that was used during World War II. And when you look at it, it's just a wonder, because it fills basically half of this room, and it was just to make computations, you know, just basically compute things that you could now compute on your phone or on your laptop, right? And you don't need half of the room to do those basic, simple, one-time calculations. And in 50 years, we've been able to, you know, miniaturize computing to the point where now we are thinking about just having things in our under our skin. There are payment methods now where, you know, you have a chip that's implanted on your skin. Why am I making this analogy? I think that with the rise of generative AI, right now, some people are calling this the most transformative thing that has happened since human beings invented fire, right? It's that kind of change. Over the past 2 years, what we've seen is something that I think when we look back 20 years from now, it will feel like we've just invented fires as a species, right? And in particular, when it comes to the online versus offline, there are already offline large language models, right, that allow you to do the same thing that you can do on ChatGPT right now, but without being connected to the internet. So just imagine what that means in terms of learning, skilling. I was actually reading an online discussion board. It may sound completely crazy and far-fetched, but people were discussing the idea that we may be at a point in our development as a species where we could send an embryo into space with an offline large language model, you know, retrieval augmented, as they say, that would be able to then be born and be somehow taught how to query that language to recreate all of human creation. That's where we are at our point in time right now, which sounds completely crazy. It sounds like, you know, crazy science fiction. If you said this maybe 20 years ago, people would be looking at you like, where is this guy coming from? But it's not that crazy anymore, right? Because what generative AI has been able to do is already in the span of the last year or so to show that we can almost encapsulate all of human knowledge into something that now can be even taken offline, right? So you could imagine schools being given these little pods where they can query this offline and be able to learn a lot of things that would be unimaginable, you know, just 5 years ago. So that was just a quick comment on online versus offline. Let's be creative and let's not be, constrained by some of these that I would call artificial challenges or obstacles or constraints. Now, going back to the question on areas that have very deep challenges. You were giving the example of South Sudan, or Sudan, sorry, and other areas around the continent and around the world, by the way. So Africa is not the only place where there are wars and difficult situations and political crises. We have our share, but we are not unique in that. And what we do, at least at ALU, is to, similar to what Natalie earlier said about Kepler, make sure that when we are selecting students, we don't just select people who are middle class from urban environments. We also have our own version of the quotas or the principles in terms of admissions that she mentioned. We are very intentional about selecting students from hard to reach constituencies and areas. So in fact, ALU is probably one of the most Pan-African schools that you could imagine. Here in Kigali, we have over 40 African countries represented out of 54. So you just think about that, right? It's an amazing melting pot. And within that, we have different types of diversity. And how does that address your question? We make sure that we have people who are coming from those environments. And in developing them as ethical entrepreneurial leaders, we make sure that part of their mission, as I was saying, is to solve a problem in their environment. I was talking just last week to one of our very brilliant students, a lady from DRC, who's a refugee from DRC, whose mission at ALU is to deal with youth pregnancy in refugee camps that she left. She was in those refugee camps. She understands the issue. She was telling me about how out of maybe 22 or 23 young girls who were her friends, she's the only one who did not get pregnant and was able to come to university. Just think about that, right? So those kinds of experiences that you cannot make up, you cannot invent, that are what we are infusing into our learning, making sure that now those individuals are given the tools and the agency to be able to go back and change their community with all of the world-class, fancy training that we give them and that we expose them to. The last question that I want to address is that the one from the gentleman about the projects that the companies that stay in the drawers, right, dans les tiroirs, as my friend from from the francophone side would say. It sounds much better when you say it in French. I'm from Senegal, by the way, so we have this expression that even governments have projects that they leave in dans les tiroirs, right, in the drawers, that they never implement, especially when it comes to youth, by the way. So what do we do about that at ALU? It's making sure that, again, in this concept of mission that I explained earlier, our students are asked to come up with a project that they need to solve. Now, they have to refine that over the course of their bachelor's degree, and that culminates into what we call a capstone project. So it's usually, more often than not, a venture that they end up creating in their last year of university out of that original mission that they had come up with very early on, right? And that they kept refining. And so in the very last stages, they do a capstone project, which is usually turning that into an entrepreneurial venture, into a company. We allow them to write theses or papers, but we are not as excited about that as we are about ventures. And over 80% of our students end up creating companies before they graduate at ALU, which is something that we are very proud of. And that's how we make sure that what you're talking about does not happen, right? We are very intentional about making them not only people who are very well adapted and adjusted to the world of work, but also make them think of themselves as job creators, not job seekers, right? It's very good to be able to find a job as soon as you graduate. It's even better and nicer to be able to create jobs for your fellow students even before you leave university, and that's what we do. For instance, if I take a very concrete example of our catering at ALU, so the cafeteria, what we do is that every year we make a competition among students and allow them to create companies that would do the catering alongside other more experienced vendors, so that they understand from a very early stage in their life what does it mean to run a business successfully. They are exposed to the criticism of their own colleagues on campus. And I can tell you it's harsh criticism, right? When you make samosas or jollof rice that doesn't taste well, your colleagues will not let you, get away with it. So they learn how to do that even as they are students by creating, for instance, catering businesses within the university and being able to run that and employing their own fellow students as they are doing that. And that's just one small example of how we kind of organically make that part of our DNA.
Thank you so much, Dr. Momar. That was very insightful. I'd also like to encourage everyone to think about how, as African continent, can we create African solutions for African problems? What works for the Western world is not going to work for us. What is working for China is not going to work for us. If we really want to change our continent, we need to create solutions for African problems, meaning that if we want to create jobs, we need to create entrepreneurs. And another thing that I like about ALU and ALX is actually the fact that even though you're an entrepreneur, you're going to be taught on how to fundraise. You'll be also exposed to funding so that if you have a solution, an opportunity plus a challenge, you at least have a starting point. And from there, we can create jobs. We can actually bridge the jobs market gap that the continent is facing, right? We have a lot of questions, but we have very limited time. Meaning that our panelists are going maybe to stay behind for a very short period of time, but I'm right on time and I sincerely apologize. So we'll have to wrap up right now. So as we wrap up, I'd like to really thank every one of you and our panelists for literally sharing their perspective and also being with us here today. We are very much privileged to have each and every one of you here. So thank you very much. So again, I would like to recap saying that for us to be able to bridge the career gaps or even the job market gaps, we really need to think about not only technical skills, but also soft skills. Because at the end of the day, when we talk about the future of work, we don't know about the future of work. But once you have the skills that are needed on the market, you will survive. You will figure it out. And then another thing that we talked about is inclusivity. Most of the time when we talk about careers, when we talk about job opportunities, we're thinking about the cities that we live in. We're thinking about our family members. I would like to encourage and challenge everyone to think about those vulnerable communities, to think about people don't have the privileges that we have, and we have many. Our African continent is facing a lot of problems, including refugees, right? So meaning that we also need to think for these marginalized communities, for also people with disabilities as well. So as we're solving for youth employment, let's also think for these people that actually also can contribute to the economy of our African continent. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that each and every one of you is going to go back home and become an ambassador for the future that we are all going to embark on. Thank you and have an amazing day.